This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by three awesome people. Ellison Cook, Super Infra Man, and 36 Dingo. If you want to help support the show, become a Patreon at wheredidtheroadgo.com. You get extra stuff all month, shows a week early, and much, much more. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And this week I am joined by Red Pill Junkie.
Good evening to all.
Super Infra Man.
Hello, everybody.
And Christopher Ernst.
Hello there, folks.
And tonight we're going to cover some more of the stories from the Mysteries of the Unexplained Reader's Digest book. Because there's still
a good one.
We did this once before, and people really, really liked it. I actually saw a copy of this at the Reuse Center down in downtown Ithaca. I don't know how rare it is. I don't think it's super rare, but like I just happened to, after we did the show last time, I happened to go in there, and I'm like, oh, look at that.
Nice.
Did you grab it?
No, because I already have it.
Oh, okay.
So I figured somebody else can have it, maybe. I did pick up Nick Redfern's Bodies in the Desert. Is that what it's called?
Body Snatchers in the desert. Yeah.
What is it?
Body Snatchers in the desert.
That's it, yes. Because I've never read that one. I didn't have it. And that was the only thing there that really stood out to me. And I was like, oh, cool.
Is that the Roswell Japanese?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very similar to the Douglas Dietrich version of what happened as well.
Okay.
So, the section I wanted to start on was atmospheric and astronomical oddities, because these are always fascinating. And we jump back to, 1786. A bright ball of fire and light accompanied a hurricane that struck England, which also seems weird to me. I mean, how many hurricanes hit England? On September 2nd, 1786. If it was ball lightning, it was unusually persistent, lasting a full 40 minutes.
Oh.
And I would think that's not completely out of the ordinary. Like, it's out of the ordinary for ball lightning, but I wouldn't think it was impossible.
Right. Yeah. Within the realm of possibility.
We know so little about ball lightning. Like, do they even acknowledge, does the science officially acknowledge ball lightning yet or not?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's not that long ago that they did acknowledge it. I mean, I guess we're talking about maybe 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things that creeped in, kind of like red sprites and some of that other stuff where, you know, people talked about it before scientists ever started treating it seriously. And yeah. I don't know if there was ever a moment somebody officially like proved it existed more so than it just got, seeped over more and more to where everybody just kind of accepted that it was a natural phenomenon.
Yeah, there were so many cases of it that it's impossible to just say, okay.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
So this one is after Sir William Herschel's observations of volcanoes on the moon in 1783 and 1787, a German astronomer named Johann Schroeter saw something even stranger. In 1788, he noted to the east of the lunar Alps and their shadow a bright point as brilliant as a fifth magnitude star, which disappeared after he had watched it for 15 minutes. After the moon had turned enough to bring the sight into full sunlight, Schroeter saw a round shadow varying from gray to black where it had been. It has been proposed that Schroeter saw at first a mountain peak projecting above the shadow cast by the adjacent lunar Alps, and then a shadow cast by the mountain itself. But as a selenographer esteemed enough to have another crater named for him in later years, would Schroeter have failed to make that identification himself? How could a steep mountain cast a round shadow under light from any direction?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, moon anomalies are some of my favorites, as are Mars anomalies.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, I mean, that could be... I mean, that's obviously anomalous. I don't think he mistook it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there was some kind of like object striking the moon, some kind of small meteor.
That's true. Yeah.
But to go on for 15 minutes seems like a long time for a meteor strike.
Yeah, I don't know how much. Obviously, the gravitational force on the moon is not high.
The same, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Something drifted slowly towards it, but I don't know. That's way beyond my scientific knowledge.
And he said something about volcanoes on the moon. Did I miss volcanoes on the moon here? I do not see anything about volcanoes on the moon.
We think of the moon as some kind of like inert rock, but yeah, in fact, the idea of volcanoes and now even the idea of water, that found on the moon, it's more acknowledged. And it's something that is going to be very, very helpful in the near future when finally we will have some kind of like permanent establishment.
Yeah. An extraordinary fog astonished the colonists in Connecticut one morning in 1758. One of them wrote, about sunrise at this place was a fog of so strange and extraordinary appearance that it filled us all with amazement. It came in great bodies like thick clouds down to the earth, and in its way, striking against the houses, would break and fall down the sides in great bodies, rolling over and over. It resembled a thick stream rising from boiling wort, a plant used in making soap, and was attended with such heat that we could hardly breathe. When first I saw it, I thought my house had been on fire, and ran out to see if it was so. But so many people thought that the world was on fire and that the last day had come. One of our neighbors was then at Sutton, 100 miles eastward, and reports that it was much the same there.
What year was this?
1758.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of mundane nature phenomena that I could think of that possibly could be that was like ash or something from, volcanic. If it's hot, but still,
this is in
the way that it's behaving sounds nothing like that. Yeah,
and it's in Connecticut. It's not anywhere where there's
exactly.
In Connecticut, right?
Yeah. That's
what do you mean? Connecticut volcanoes? Yeah.
The Connecticut, instead of a super volcano, it's a wimpy volcano.
Yeah.
The famous Connecticut caldera.
What's the fog? Who is the fog? I'm completely being reductive here. The fog guy. I think both you and Adam had him on recently.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, was that? Was it Watson?
Yes.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I believe he also has a new book out that I have not contacted him about yet because I'm many books behind. But yeah, the episodes Josh and I did with him about the fog were very interesting. Yeah. But he doesn't have this account in there. So this one, a mirage of a walled town was seen at Youghal, Ireland in October 1796. Again the following March, and in June 1801, there appeared to be a mirage of an unknown city, mansions surrounded by shrubbery with a forest behind them.
Oh, fascinating.
Now, I know
that's interesting. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's interesting that it was recurring, which makes it seem sort of like something that could be a natural phenomena that's just refracted or something like that. I love Fata Morgana anyway when we hear these kinds of things, so that's where my brain goes to.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's also, the legend of High Brasil.
Yes.
This phantom island off the coast of Ireland appears from time to time as even, registered in some ancient maps. Another thing that I was thinking is as much as it pained me to give credence to Jeremy Corbell, but in his documentary of the Skinwalker Ranch, which I actually enjoyed and I would even recommend watching, there's this idea of the cameras of the ranch recording one time these almost like a mirage that looked like a city, like some kind of city seen in the distance that was obviously impossible because this ranch is in the middle of the country in Utah,
right?
And it brings up the idea that on some occasions there is this like portal or veil that reveals some sort of other dimension, dimensions that where you can see walled cities when there should be just open country, or skyscrapers where you should see only like desert or prairies. Yeah. So that's something that really, really intrigues me.
Yeah.
Well, you got so much Fae lore too in Ireland that makes a lot of sense there too.
For sure. Yeah.
Speak to that.
All right. So the next one that was interesting here was strange howling noises in the air and large spots obscuring the sun were reported along with an earthquake at Palermo, Italy in April 1817. So, I mean, okay, so howling noises and earthquake, maybe there's some obvious connections there of maybe rock scraping against rock in some way, but large spots obscuring the sun, like, what's that?
Yeah.
That makes me think of Fatima. Red Pill, you bring that up a fair amount. Yeah. I wonder, the howling noise is also, obviously, we don't have a strong description of it, but the metal wrenching trumpet sound.
Yeah. That's what it brought to mind for me too.
Yeah, that crossed my mind too when you mentioned that. I was like, okay, that's interesting.
Which were being heard everywhere for a while and then just seemed to stop.
I wonder how the spots sort of like if they were, like an eclipse, if it was slowly moving, or if it was like there was a object, or if it sort of appeared, or if it was like a sunspot. I mean, God forbid somebody's able to see a sunspot with their naked eye.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This was 1817 is when it happened. So I mean, the equipment was going to be very limited.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it makes me wonder, to your point, if you had some object passing between, fairly close to us, that maybe even gravitational forces, causing some of those tremors and things like that. I don't know.
And of course, during a volcanic eruption, there is such a dispersal of ash in the atmosphere that you probably be able to see the sun, for at least for a few seconds without hurting your eyes, because the level of illumination is greatly decreased. Maybe you will be able to see. Sunspots will be. I'm speculating here, but maybe it will be tantamount to putting some kind of like lens on your eyes in order to perceive structures within the solar. What do you call this? The atmosphere.
But there was no volcano. At this point, it was just an earthquake.
Oh, okay. So it's just an earthquake. Okay.
So,
but maybe the volcanic eruption will cause earthquakes and will cause hurling of rocks. And that will account for those screeching noises. I don't know.
Yeah. So this one's really interesting. What seemed to be an unknown planet was seen crossing the sun's disk by German astronomer Stark in Augsburg on October 9th, 1819. He observed the same thing again on February 12th, 1820. The second appearance was described as a singular and well-defined circular spot with indications of an atmosphere which was not visible in the evening of the same day, as any planet with an orbit inside the Earth's should have been.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think I remember reading about that. This guy was totally ridiculed by the scientific community, and I think there are even cartoons about it showing him with a Dunes hat, looking through a telescope and all that. I don't know. Maybe, now that we are in 2022, and there's this modern speculation about Oumuamua.
Right.
Maybe this guy looked at some kind of like a rogue interstellar object traversing through our solar system.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking too. Remember the what was it? I forget the name of it. Was it Tabby's star or something? This was from a few years ago. There was the particular star that I think it was maybe an astronomer in New Zealand. She found that had something that was orbiting around it that was at such regular intervals that people were, making Dyson sphere speculations. It was a thing for a little while.
Yeah,
but then
I think that it was diminishing its brilliance.
Right.
Yeah.
It was diminishing its brilliance
Yeah.
at certain, regular intervals.
Exactly. Yeah.
But this makes me think of that too. Yeah, which it certainly could be some sort of meteor or comet, or actually, it probably have to be bigger than that, but some sort of foreign body going through, like a Momoa. Yeah.
And we know there are rogue planets out there.
Right.
We do.
Yeah, they have said that they've found rogue planets not attached to any star systems.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, this next one of the most widespread, quote, dark days of history came to eastern Canada and New England on November 10th, 1819. There had been a heavy soap-like rain on November 8th, which left behind a sooty residue. Then, in Montreal, on the morning of Tuesday the 10th, heavy clouds again covered the sky and changed rapidly from a deep green to a pitchy black, and the sun, when occasionally seen through them, was something of a dark brown or an unearthly yellow color, and again bright orange or even blood red. The day became almost dark as night, the gloom increasing and diminishing almost fitfully. At noon, lights had to be burned in the courthouse, the bank, the public offices of the city. Everybody was more or less alarmed. About the middle of the afternoon, a great body of clouds seemed to rush suddenly over the city, and the darkness became that of night. A pause and a hush for a moment or two succeeded, and then one of the most glaring flashes of lightning ever beheld flamed over the country, accompanied by a clap of thunder which seemed to shake the city to its foundations. And then came a light shower of rain of the same soapy and sooty nature as that of 2 days before. Another rush of clouds came, and another vivid flash of lightning, which was then seen to strike the spire of the old French parish church and play curiously about the large iron cross at its summit before descending to the ground. A moment later came the climax of the day. Every bell in the city suddenly rang out the alarm of fire, and the affrighted citizens rushed out of their houses into the streets. Directly, the great iron cross, together with the ball at its foot, fell to the ground with a crash and was shivered to pieces. The real night came on, and the next morning dawned. Everything was bright and clear, and the world was as natural as before. The rain's strange texture suggests a distant volcanic eruption or forest fire, the usual explanation for dark days, but the accompanying electrical storm hints at something more than just smoke. Meteorologists do not yet know how much the effects of such rarely occurring clouds of smoke and ash upon the weather.
I saw something recently that was interesting. That was, and I honestly saw this like scrolling through Reddit or something brainless like that. But it was a ash cloud coming from some sort of dormant volcano, and there was all this crazy electrical activity, essentially lightning happening in it because of the particles. The phenomena where the particles are rubbing up against each other. Now, this made me think of that a little bit.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And you get reports of church bells ringing from before earthquakes hit and things like that too. So if you had some serious volcanic activity, that could be happening.
True. But it doesn't seem like there was any reports of volcanic activity at the time.
Right, yeah.
I wonder what happens if we Google it now. Let's see. That was on November 10th.
That's true, because if this is Reader's Digest, it's quite possible that they were, if this is from what, 1980 something?
Yeah, 1980 something. And then, this is quoted from an article from the Scientific American of 1881.
Okay, that's a reputable source.
So September 10th, 1819, dark day. I'm sure there's an article about it somewhere. Okay, there's a Wikipedia article. So we know that's going to be as dismissive as possible. The primary cause of the event is believed to have been a combination of smoke from forest fires, a thick fog, and cloud cover.
Sure. Okay.
Forest fires. Okay. Interesting.
What? Yeah. I wonder, though, if one could correlate, if they really did want to look at this point, because it doesn't seem like Wikipedia really did any research. No surprise. If there were natural phenomena that, were happening around there, that now that we have, much greater access to information and perhaps meteorological information.
It says the likely...
I remember the photographs from Australia a couple of years ago when they had those horrible forest fires at the beginning of that year. I think I'm talking 2020 or something like that.
Yeah.
And they look totally, apocalyptic. The sky's totally, in a deep orange. You couldn't see beyond 20, 30 feet. Maybe that with, obviously aggrandization and exaggeration produced by the passage of the years, maybe that something like a nasty forest fire could account for some of the things in this account.
So it says researchers examining tree rings and fire scars in trees in the area that is today occupied by the Alaquin Provincial Park in Ontario, Canada, see evidence of a fire in 1780 and attribute the dark day to that. But it couldn't have just been the fire. I mean, that
right.
Something else was happening along with it.
Yeah, they built churches and all that.
Yeah.
So, it's almost certainly going to be part of the factor, but something else happened there that we don't understand.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mysterious booms, but mysterious booms are not actually that weird. They are, but they're not that uncommon.
Yeah.
At Forest Hills, Arkansas, the sky was clear on December 8th, 1847. Then, in mid-afternoon, turbulent clouds formed suddenly, appearing like a solid black fleece lighted from above by a red glare as of many torches. A loud explosion shook houses and rang the bell of the church, and a barrel-sized flaming body crashed into the earth just outside of town, making a hole 8 feet deep and more than 2 feet in diameter. The rock that was found at the bottom of the hole smelled of sulfur and was hot enough to boil away water thrown on it. Inside of 20 minutes, the sky cleared and the sun shone again. Was the phenomenon at Forest Hill a meteorite impact? If so, there is no plausible explanation for the clouds beforehand. A meteorite passes through the entire atmosphere within a few seconds and cannot affect the air over its impact zone while it still scores or hundreds miles away. That feels like it's not written right. Is it possible the lightning fused the soil into a solid mass at the bottom of the hole? Such a stone, known as fulgurite, is not uncommon, but barrel-sized chunks of it are unheard of.
Yeah. Well, hopefully everybody who's around got superpowers, but
yeah, right. You could just have the fact that there happened to be a flash storm that came in just coincidentally, I suppose.
True, but it's still a very unusual one regardless.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so this one is another planet. A planet closer to the sun than Mercury was observed on March 26, 1859 by a French country doctor, an amateur astronomer named Lescarbault. He watched it begin its transit across the sun's disk, and after an interruption to attend a patient, finished timing the transit and chalked his observations on a pine board. Lescarbault's evidence was good enough to convince Urbain Jean-Joseph Le Verrier, the most illustrious astronomer in France, of his existence. Le Verrier proposed that the gravitational pull of Vulcan would explain the advance of Mercury's perihelion, its closest point to the sun, observed to be 43 inches every 100 years. Unfortunately, the planet, also called Vulcan, has never been proved to exist, and today most astronomers think that the country doctor and hundreds of others over the years were somehow mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah, they have a whole little cutout here for Vulcan called the Once and Future Planet. Prehistoric sky watchers noticed that 5 bright points of light did not move within the wheeling of the fixed stars. These planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, were woven into astrology and legend. Around AD 1600, the Earth itself became recognized as another member of the Sun's family. Sir William Herschel discovered Uranus in 1781. In the 1840s, Urbain Verrier and John Couch Adams independently analyzed small irregularities in Uranus's orbit, which led to the discovery of Neptune. Then 84 years later, a similar study of Uranus and Neptune pointed the way to frigid Pluto, the outermost known planet. Along the way, however, a 10th planet had made a brief appearance. The existence of Vulcan, a small planet supposedly orbiting even closer to the Sun than Mercury, was affirmed in 1859 by no less an authority than Verrier. His suspicion had been aroused by Mercury's tiny deviation from its predicted path. Combing the records, he found many reports of a small black disk seen fleetingly against the Sun. From these reports, Le Verrier selected the most consistent and computed that Vulcan must orbit about 13 million miles from the Sun with a full year of only 20 Earth days. It was clear that further observations of Vulcan would require both luck and skill. Much of the time it would appear lost in the Sun's glare. Only during solar eclipses and during its periodic transits of the Sun, when it could be easily mistaken for a sunspot, would let it stand out. Le Verrier predicted that the best viewing date would be March 22, 1877. In the years that followed, further scattered reports were published, and some textbooks added Vulcan to the list of planets. Thus, it was discouraging when not one of the many astronomers poised to observe it in 1877 was able to find Vulcan. But hopes rose again the following year when 2 American astronomers observing an eclipse from separate sites in Wyoming and Colorado spotted something that was not a known star very near the Sun. A writer in Popular Science said, "The interesting observations of Professor Watson and Mr. Smith will not only stimulate astronomers to renewed search for the planet, so fortunately detected, but must also lead to a more thorough examination of the space within Mercury's orbit. It is not improbable that the detection of Vulcan may be merely the first in a series of similar discoveries." Alas for optimism, the Watson and Swift's observations were not repeated, and other astronomers, having been burned out or being burned often enough to be shy, indeed, of any alleged Vulcan, questioned the accuracy of the American sightings. So I would think if there was anything there now, we would see it with all the sun-based telescopes that we'd have.
Right.
Of course.
For sure.
But it does make me think about the fact that, even though I know that everybody thinks we know everything, not everybody, but there are a lot of people who think that, the efficacy of the scientific method, which is absolutely effective, has somehow, allowed us to really know everything. And while, I know that there probably are more people than not that have some humility and understand that we don't, particularly those who really are in the sciences. I think there are a lot of folks that there's sort of like an underlying assumption that, everything is assumed and that we know enough that there are some sort of like concrete things that we can say are certain and true. And I think it's pretty hard, besides the fact that, we're probably going to be breathing tomorrow, our own breath. It's hard. I mean, because there are huge jumps and things like that, like the idea of a planet named Vulcan. I mean, try going, and talking about that right now, presenting a paper on that. Yeah.
But again, that's also, we have these very powerful space, telescopes where we can look directly at the sun. If there was something else crossing it, I think we would probably be able to see it with the detail that we can actually get. But it doesn't mean there wasn't a planet there at one point that maybe got sucked into the sun.
Sure.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Sure.
Too,
Yeah.
I mean, we like to think that our solar system is, pretty stable and quiet.
Right.
But we don't exactly know that for sure. Going back to Chris's point, we've got asteroid belts and things like that you could speculate on why they're there, opposite of conventional narratives on it. But you could even have something that came into orbit around the sun for a while, that was a rogue planet, and then kept going.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got slingshotted out.
Regardless of the existence of this rogue planet Vulcan or not, I cannot help but feel a deep sense of nostalgia and admiration for that time, that age in the 19th century when people were so excited with the idea of discovery and scientific advancement at the cusp of the Industrial Revolution, that they were so eager to participate, in the discoveries of science, that people say, hey, anyone can make these discoveries, that you don't need a PhD from Harvard or whatever to also try to find your own planet. There was this country doctor who was an amateur astronomer who wanted to dig in and be part of this revolution in human understanding. And it's hard not to feel certain disappointment that I don't feel that is happening anymore nowadays. Like you said, whatever it is that it's out there, they will tell us because they have the big telescopes in the sky or whatever. Why should I bother to try to find another planet? And it's kind of sad, that there's not the idea of the inventor tinkerer that is working in his basement, trying to find the next big invention that is like the next Edison or the next Tesla. I guess there are people like that, but mostly in things that are like computers.
They're mining crypto and making NFTs.
Yeah, they're not, and it's not the same, right? It's not the same. I mean, it's something that Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are learning the hard way. Yeah, it's not the same that is making advancements in the quote unquote safety of cybernetics and computer technologies than it is to try to build a freaking rocket, because the freaking rocket will blow up, if you don't take everything into account, and that is the thing that I feel it's lacking nowadays. That sense of adventure, that sense of discovery, that sense of people trying to be pioneers in something. I feel there's all this stagnation that is so different from what was happening back 100 years ago.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really funny because of all of the sort of technological advances that we've made. Instead of this being, I think the futuristic utopia that was in many ways envisioned, it's become very much, there's a disenchantment with sort of the wonder and exploration of the world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this next one's kind of frightening. A superheated whirlwind passed through Chatham County, Tennessee one summer day in 1869. On the farm of Ed Sharp, 5 miles from Ashland, a sort of whirlwind came along over the neighboring woods, taking up small branches and leaves of trees and burning them in a sort of flaming cylinder that traveled at the rate of about 5 miles an hour, developing size as it traveled. It passed directly over the spot where a team of horses were feeding and singed their manes and tails up to the roots, and then swept toward the house, taking a stack of hay in its course. It seemed to increase in heat as it went, and by the time it reached the house, it immediately fried the shingles from end to end of the building, so that in 10 minutes the whole dwelling was wrapped in flames. The tall column of traveling caloric, the chemical substance of fire according to a theory already outmoded in 1869, then continued its course over a wheat field that had been recently cradled, setting fire to all the stacks that happened to be in its course. Passing from the field, its path lay over a stretch of wood which reached to the river. The green leaves on the trees were crisped to a cinder for a breadth of 20 yards in a straight line to the Cumberland. When the pillar of fire reached the water, it suddenly changed its route down the river, raising a column of steam which went up to the clouds for about half a mile. When it finally died out, not less than 200 people witnessed the strangest of strange phenomena, and all of them tell substantially the same story about it. The farmer, Sharp, was left houseless by the devouring element, and his 2 horses were so affected that no good is expected to be gotten out of them in the future. Several withered trees in the woods through which it passed were set on fire and continue burning still. This phenomenon combines the most peculiar aspects of whirlwinds, their self-contained nature, apparently unconnected to clouds and large-scale weather, and of tornadoes, which are often accompanied by a variety of odd electrical charges or discharges. It is worth noting that to set fire to straw and shingles, heated air alone, assuming no electrical sparks, would have to be at 400 degrees Fahrenheit or more. That is not
plasma or a gin.
That is not something I want to experience.
No, we know that fire tornadoes are a thing. These firestorms are called, and this is something that you can find videos of that.
Yes,
in YouTube if you search fire tornado or firestorm, and this is something that actually the late Dr. James McDonald, the guy who is in the pantheon of ufology, was very interested in, and it is one of the reasons why we chose for me to add a fire tornado in the card that is devoted to James McDonald within our Ufology Tarot project. If you look closely, at the picture, there is a fire tornado behind him, going from the upper left of the image of the card to the lower right.
So we know fire tornadoes exist, but do they exist independent of like forest fires and stuff?
Well, we don't know what caused the fire tornado. Maybe it was something independent of a forest fire. Maybe there was a burning house, or maybe there was another source of heat that happened to coincide with a wind vortex that produced the fire tornado.
I mean, tornadoes are bad enough without needing to be on fire.
That's for sure.
Yeah, right.
Changing patterns of light appeared in the lunar crater Plato from the late 1860s through 1871. Reputable selenologists saw them enough to assign them numbers and chart their dimming and brightening. More than 1,600 such observations were collected by selenologist W.R. Burt and deposited in the library of the Royal Astronomical Association. So that's more of the lunar lights that we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that it happened for that period of time, too. It was a few years.
Yeah,
1860s through 71, so probably about a decade.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't remember someone recording some of those lunar lights in recent history.
No,
I don't either. Yeah, and you would think that with the, you can get some pretty powerful telescopes at this point, home telescopes.
Yeah,
and do digital imaging. Yeah,
and there's no reason to think that that these people are wrong about their observations. That's the thing. I mean, that was a bunch of people seeing those lights.
Right.
Exactly.
And so, is it a natural lunar phenomena, or is it maybe something else?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, we know that there's vast deposits of what they call helium-3 on the moon, and it is one of the main reasons why superpowers are so eager to go back to the moon and claim a piece of property. Put little flags there, because it might be the thing that solves the world energy crisis. Having nuclear reactors on the moon that beam down energy to the Earth through some kind of like microwave rays or something. Yeah. Maybe those deposits of helium-3 are responsible for the lunar light phenomena that was registered in decades or centuries past. But again, why is it that we don't record them anymore?
Yeah. What may have been ball lightning appeared to a woman in Remahan, England, on a cold day in 1871. The wallpaper and furniture of the room were suddenly flashed with rose color, which gradually deepened into crimson, passing through bright gold into orange, lilac, and deep violet. She looked out the window and saw, quote, air bubbles, a few inches in diameter, rising from the level snow outside. They took on the same hues seen inside and bobbed up and down before a breeze blew them away, only to be replaced by another group. There were no apparent sparks or electrical odors.
Wow.
I don't know if that counts as ball lightning.
Yeah.
Yeah, me neither.
Bubble lightning.
Bubble lightning. There you go.
Yeah, we will call them orbs today.
Yeah, that's where my brain was going to, Red Pill. I like that it got blown around. That's interesting.
Yeah. So this one, similar bubbles were observed in very different weather at Ringstead Bay, England in August 1876. A mother and daughter were walking near a seaside cliff on a hot, sultry afternoon marked by sheet lightning but no thunder. Over the crest of the ground, surrounding them on all sides and extending from a few inches above the surface to 2 to 3 feet overhead, numerous globes of light the size of billiard balls were moving independently and vertically up and down, sometimes within a few inches of the observers, but always eluding their grasp, now gliding slowly upwards 2 or 3 feet, and as slowly falling again, resembling in their movements soap bubbles floating in the air. The balls were all aglow. The numbers were continually fluctuating. At one time, thousands of them apparently enveloped the observers, and a few minutes afterwards, the numbers would dwindle to perhaps as few as 20, but soon they would be swarming again, as numerous as ever. Not the slightest noise accompanied this display. The ladies sauntered up to the quarry and down again several times along the cliff, viewing the phenomena for upwards of an hour. About 10 p.m., a severe thunderstorm attended with torrents of rain came up from the sea.
Does any of that sound similar to the lights experience that you had, Seriah? In
a little bit.
Yeah.
But there wasn't. This seems like there was a lot more covering a much wider area, but that's, as I'm reading that, I'm like, I've seen little lights floating around me and interacting with me, but
Right.
2 of us saw it and one didn't, so it wasn't clearly a very
Right.
a super physical phenomena. I don't know how to define that exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, and maybe these 2 people were the only 2 people who could have seen it. Maybe if someone else was there, they wouldn't have seen it. Who knows?
Right. Yeah. Unless it says that there were, multiple eyewitnesses or the town all saw it. It could very well be that it's 1 or 2 people that are experiencing some of these.
I mean, back in the 90s, Jaime Maussan used to show these videos recorded by people in, I don't know, Puebla or some other states in Mexico, where we will see dozens of lights in the sky, like a swarm of fireflies, man. But although these lights remained static, and obviously, some say, oh, you see, a whole fleet of UFOs, but maybe if there was something akin to these accounts, maybe there's some kind of like light phenomena, light bubbles that stay in the sky and like you say, maybe sometimes they can be recorded.
What if you have like a plasma bubble?
That's a good question. I mean, a very interesting question. Plasma bubble, yeah.
So the next one, I looked this one up right off the bat. The Yellow Day that came to New England and New York State on September 6, 1881, has been ascribed, like many other such phenomena, to a prairie fire or forest fire in the far west, its smoke at high altitude being concentrated by local atmospheric eddies. And it says here, be that as it may, no specific fire has been associated with the Yellow Day, but now, if you look at Wikipedia, it says the Thumb Fire took place on September 5th, 1881, in the Thumb area of Michigan in the United States. The fire, which burned over 1 million acres in less than a day, was the consequence of drought, hurricane-force winds, heat, and the after effects of the Port Huron Fire of 1871, and the ecological damage wrought by the area's logging techniques. The blaze, also called the Great Thumb Fire, the Great Forest Fire of 1881, and the Huron Fire, killed 282 people. And the damage estimate was $2,347,000. In 1881, equivalent to that, $65 million when adjusted for inflation. The fire sent enough soot and ash up into the atmosphere that sunlight was partially obscured at many locations on the east coast of the U.S. In New England cities, the sky appeared yellow and projected a strange luminosity onto buildings and vegetation. Twilight appeared at 12 noon. September 6, 1881 became known as Yellow Tuesday or Yellow Day because of the ominous nature of the atmospheric event. So that one seems like a pretty solid explanation.
Yeah.
I would say so, yeah.
On the night of July 3rd, 1882, the moon was almost full. About 45 minutes after moonrise, several residents of Lebanon, Connecticut, why are all these in the Northeast? Noticed a strange spectacle. Two pyramidal luminous protuberances appeared on the moon's upper limb. They were not large, but they gave the moon a look strikingly like that of a horned owl or the head of an English bull terrier. These points were a little darker than the rest of the moon's face. They slowly faded away after a few moments, one on the right and southeasterly quarter disappearing first. About 3 minutes after their disappearance, two black triangular notches were seen on the lower edge of the moon. These points gradually moved toward each other along the moon's edge and seemed to be cutting off or obliterating nearly a quarter of its surface until they finally met, when the moon's face instantly assumed its normal appearance. When the notches were nearing each other, part of the moon that was seen between them was in the form of a dove's tail.
Dove's tail.
I have no idea what that one is all about.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pass that one.
That's just bizarre.
Yeah. That's just, huh?
I love it, but yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a forest fire.
No.
That was ergot in the breath.
4 people on an avenue in Davidson's Mains, a suburb of Edinburgh, Scotland, had an unclassifiable experience on the evening of July 23rd, 1885. I love unclassifiable experiences, honestly. We saw a feebly luminous flash appear on the ground at a distance of some 30 yards down the avenue. It rushed towards us with a wave-like motion at a rate which I estimate to be 30 miles an hour and seemed to envelop us for an instant. My left hand, which was hanging by my side, experienced precisely the same sensation as I have felt in receiving a shock from a weak galvanic battery. About 3 minutes afterwards, we heard a peal of thunder. Another of the party says he observed what seems to be a luminous cloud running up the avenue with a wavy motion. When it reached the party, it rose off the ground, passed over the bodies of 2 of them, casting a sort of flash on their shoulders. The gardener saw a flash of lightning in the direction of the luminous cloud, but sideways. Also, that the top of the cloud seemed to be 3 or 4 feet from the ground, and then it gradually rose higher as it came along. When the cloud reached the party, he saw one of them distinctly by its light. That was published in Nature in 1885.
Wow. 85, huh?
So that's, I don't know what to call that. I've never heard a story like that before.
Oh, no, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we should probably Google this one too. I'll let one of you Google this one. No forest fire can be blamed for whatever happened in Oshkosh, Wisconsin on May 19th, 1886. At 3 p.m. on a cloudy day, midnight darkness settled down over a 5-minute period. It was startling enough to disturb horses and send people rushing through the streets. After 10 minutes, it was gone. According to the local paper, cities to the west say the same phenomenon was observed there in advance of its appearance here, showing that the wave of darkness passed west to east. Nothing could be seen to indicate any air currents overhead, and there was no solar eclipse on that date. I don't know how to look that up necessarily. Maybe March
1886?
March 19th, 1886.
Yeah.
Darkness, maybe 10 minutes.
Was it Oshkosh?
Said? Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
So if you, the Northwestern, which looks to be like a local paper of some kind, has a little article called Odd Oshkosh. The city's quirky history includes frog dealers, bathtub races, some other stuff like that. But the first thing it actually talks about is a non-electrical blackout sweeping over the city at 3 p.m. that day in March 19, 1886.
That's it.
Yeah.
No explanation?
No, they're just recounting what the article said. It looks like began to grow dark very rapidly in the space of less than 5 minutes. Sun had become obscured, and that within doors it was almost dark as night, while the outside was much the same effect as a heavy thunder shower. Interesting.
Yeah, and cool that they celebrate it.
Yeah. Did you mention the part that the same phenomenon happened in Berlin and Eureka around the same time?
It's said to the west that certain places experienced it.
Okay.
And it seemed to be moving from that direction.
Yeah, it says witnesses claimed it to be a dense black cloud or mist that had encroached from the west. And then this article lists over Berlin and Eureka. No readily available explanations for the event, and then just, they had theories they threw out and things like that, but that's all. There's no contemporary follow-up to say what they thought it might be.
It does say, though, that the witnesses remained adamant that it was an abnormal weather event that had never been encountered before there, and that it was not merely clouds obscuring the sunlight. Which, if a lot of people are saying that, I gotta try to believe them. Like, is in, what weather looks like in your own...
Yes.
For the most part. I mean, I know there are anomalous clouds that, look crazy, but oftentimes they still look like clouds.
An apparent dust storm or cloud on Mars was observed in late May 1903, both by W.F. Denning in England and Percival Lowell in Arizona. Interestingly, although Lowell's many straight Martian canals eventually proved to be an illusion, his observations of transient changes in the planet's color are amongst the best of their time. And I wonder about that. How did he observe canals that aren't there? Like, did he observe something that then changed? Was he just wrong?
Are these the lava tubes that people were talking? That whole, which is essentially like, these are just they're structures. They're geologic structures,
right?
That were just people were misinterpreting them because of their seeing them through less than detailed telescopes.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one explanation is that somehow he was perceiving the blood vessels of his own cornea.
Oh, wow.
Right. Yes, I had heard that before. Yeah.
Telescope. But the thing is that he wasn't the only one, like the first one who alluded to the existence of these elements. Well, I mean, I think this is the idea that it was a misunderstanding with the translation. It was that this Italian scientist Schiaparelli,
yes,
I don't know how to pronounce it, wrote about the existence of canali on the surface of Mars, and somehow canals was, channels was translated to English into canals. Canals as the idea that it is something that is not naturally occurring, that it is some artificially made. So that's how Percival Lowell came up with the idea of that there is this canals on Mars.
Yes, that is like that. The 19th and 20th century. That's absolutely. I totally remember that.
Yeah.
A brief and inexplicable darkness fell on Wimbledon, England, one day in 1904. It continued for 10 minutes. There was no sign of rain clouds or any abnormal amount of smoke. A beach burst into flames at Kittery Point, Maine on September 1st, 1905. The guests at the Hotel Parkfield were startled by the appearance of flames rising from the beach and from the surface of the water. An event of so remarkable and unusual a character as to excite great curiosity and some alarm. The conflagration occurred between 7 and 8 o'clock in the evening and lasted for upwards to 45 minutes. The flames were about 1 foot in height, and they were accompanied by a loud and continuous crackling noise, which could be distinctly heard 100 miles away. While at the same time there was a strong liberation of sulfurous acidic fumes, which penetrated the hotel, drove the proprietor and his staff from the office, and filled the other rooms to such an extent as to cause great inconvenience to the guests. One guest of an investigating turn of mind secured some of the sand in his hand, but was obliged to drop it on account of the heat. When some of the sand was taken into the hotel and stirred in water, bubbles of gas were liberated and produced flame as they broke the surface in contact with the air. D.P. Pennenhau examined the beach and concluded that a layer of buried seaweed had fermented, creating pockets of carbureted and phosphorated hydrogen and other gases. His explanation is so plausible that one can only wonder why blazing beaches are not a common seaside attraction.
Huh.
I mean, it does make sense, but why has it only happened there? Must have just been the perfect conditions.
Yeah, I feel like you don't get many reports of these things happening nowadays.
Huh?
No.
No, yeah, you really don't.
Yeah.
Like Days of Darkness and things like that.
Right. I mean, the closest thing I can think of is the Havana syndrome, and that's a whole other.
Yeah.
Well, it's turned into a whole other ball of wax. Yeah, probably is too.
A transient shadow on the moon was observed by Dr. F.B. Harris on January 27th, 1912. About 10:30 Eastern Time, I was surprised to see the left cusp showing the presence of an intensely black body about 250 miles long and 50 miles wide, allowing 2,000 miles from tip of cusp to cusp. The appearance was fully as black, comparatively as marks on this paper, and in the shape like a crow poised. Of course, dark places are here and there on the lunar surface, but not like this. Not to be tedious, I will say that every effort was made to eliminate any error of vision or other mistake. The moon is very tricky, and it is very unlikely that anything of this character will be seen in many hundreds of years, or hundreds of years even. I cannot but think that it's a very interesting and curious phenomena happened. We'll put that in the same category as the triangles and stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of that famous video of the Phobos 2 Soviet probe that showed some kind of like elongated shadow on the surface of the Martian moon before the probe lost contact with Earth, and which has raised a lot of speculation about what happened. From people say, well, obviously there was some kind of like alien probe that snatched the human probe before we learned more about the aliens presence on Mars, to just people not really talking about it, saying, oh well, we lost the probe the same way that other missions to Mars have failed.
Right. Let's take a quick break and we'll finish up the show after this. I want to take a moment here and thank all of my Patreons for making Where Did the Road Go what it is. I want to give a special shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more: Chuck Shutters, Leanne Cherry, Allison Cook, Super Infra Man, 36 Dingo, CJ, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Christine, a blue second-gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, Alex Whitcomb, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy and Communicable, Lauren McLean, Chris Ernst, Greg Parmenter, Crystal Ann Compton, Diane B., Edu Camahort, Empty K, Eric Citron, Varosh K, Eric Todd, Jim Pyre, Joanna Rojas, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Ann Wittowski, Kevin Schreck, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, MJ Armstrong, Jim and Sophie, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Ron Dupre, Sam Chiron, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Vincent Trewell Walker, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Stephen D., and Amber Hall. Thank you all so very, very much.
We live our entire lives knowing that death awaits us. Many believe that some part of us endures. Eyewitnesses swear to have seen spirits of the dead haunting the living, and even appearing during alien abductions. Is the UFO mystery reaching out to us from beyond the stars, or from beyond the grave? This staggering implication demands not only scrutiny of the UFO phenomenon, but near-death experiences, ancient monuments, ley lines, the Fey folk, cryptids, and more. I'm Joshua Cutchin. I'd like to invite you into the Ecology of Souls, a new mythology of death and the paranormal, a comprehensive theory of all things supernatural framed through the lens of our final transition. Join me as we journey from the depths of prehistory to the present, From the outer space of the cosmos to the inner space of the self. Ecology of Souls, Volumes 1 and 2, now available from Amazon in print and as a combined ebook. Welcome to the Ecology of Souls.
So we're talking here. We're covering stories from Mysteries of the Unexplained. I'm with Red Pill Junkie and Christopher Ernst and Super Infra Man, and we were just talking about the probe, the Russian probe that disappeared on the way to Phobos, or that was it was on the way to move around Mars. Was it the Phobos probe?
Phobos 2 probe.
Phobos 2 probe. Yes, and those pictures are hard to deny because you got the shadow of something on Mars, and then you have a light, and then the light seems to change direction and move into the probe itself, and then there's nothing. And I believe when it happened, the Russians said something like a UFO knocked our probe out.
Yeah, there was this Russian cosmonaut, I forget her name, the first woman who went to space, Valentina Purishkova or something like that, was very vocal about this incident and was very candid in her support to the idea that the Soviet probe was knocked out by an alien probe. But what's interesting is that number one, the Soviets didn't mind her talking about it. Maybe that's because it was the times of the glasnost, perestroika, and the new openness between the East and the West. And number two, that nothing came about it. So those stories like the Voronezh incident that people just simply decided to forget.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, there's not really much we can do to figure out what happened beyond those couple of photographs, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless they find the probe on the ground, somewhere on Mars, and then maybe, they would or wouldn't tell us about it.
Or there were more photos than the ones that they showed.
That's also a possibility, yeah.
I think that's usually the case.
That's the point. Yeah, I mean, it was 89. That's interesting because I think had that been earlier, Valentina advocating for something, taking it out, essentially, we would have written that off as like, well, they just don't want to say that it failed.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, to Red Pill's point, that was an interesting time because I guess, let's see, when did the Soviet Union fall? Was it right before that?
After that, I guess.
After that. Okay. But the cooperation and things like that were going on. So I don't know. It's interesting how it just kind of came and went. I hadn't thought about that, actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's definitely weirdness with things going to Mars. I mean, it's a hard trip to make. It's not surprising that some of these fail, but those photos are weird and they're not explained.
No. I don't know. I get fascinated by, we're talking about rivers and things, canals on the moon and Mars and what have you. The perceptions we had of these planets before we sent probes to them, or before we had strong telescopes or any other ways to view them, there was speculation of all kinds of life on Mars and things like that.
Yeah. And
I always kind of wonder if they were, I don't know, either we were picking up on something or I don't know. I wonder if there was more to that in a way, but maybe we were witnessing a different time or something. I don't know.
Ghosts
well,
of
Nikola
Mars.
Tesla was so sure that he was picking up signals from Mars, and he used to talk about it in the news.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right. And some people, I think the general sort of dismissive speculation is that he was picking up like gamma ray bursts or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he was. I mean, Tesla was so far ahead of his time. It's frightening.
Right. Well, he was saying that it was some sort of, consciousness or, sentient species. And,
yeah.
I mean, it could be that fast radio bursts are, we still don't know what they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we kind of dismiss or assume that are just natural that we really can't explain.
Right. But yes, you're right. Tesla was super. He was, he truly was ahead of his time and very much taken advantage of. And there is some serious sketchiness in terms of all of his stuff being essentially taken by the government. You know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's even this idea that the Trump family was involved with that.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, was it his uncle?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
He ended up with his notes, I believe, or supposedly he was the one that took them. Yeah, it was Frank, right? Frank Trump, I thinking right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he understood electrical stuff better than probably anyone ever has.
Yeah.
If we had gone with, if Edison had not been the bully, and that's putting it very mildly, that he was also a genius, but he also stole a lot of people's patents that they made for him.
Yep.
If it was Tesla that and his electrical sort of system that we had taken rather than Edison's, it would be a very different world we live in now.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think we would be so much further along of understanding the relationship between like magnetism and electricity and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there that. Go ahead, Red Pill.
It was beyond technology. I mean, because what Tesla was proposing, and this is something that obviously was totally against the society at the time, and even modern society, was the free distribution of unlimited energy to society.
Yep.
Yes.
And the people who were backing him at the time, like Westinghouse, when they heard such an idea, like, they were like, no, I wanna make a buck out of this. So I mean, you want Tesla technology, you gotta get rid of capitalism because you can't have both.
Yeah. He patented that in like 1901, I think.
Yeah.
It was what was it? It was like apparatus for radiant energy.
Yeah. All right.
Love the theory that was when Tesla caused that like mild earthquake around his laboratory was the same day as the Tunguska event.
As Tunguska, yeah.
Like,
And there was the other guy in Italy, Marconi, who also was pretty much ahead of his time, and Jean Keel writes about him on the Eighth Tower about his investigations on things like a death ray.
Yeah.
That Benito Mussolini was very excited about it. He told his people, whatever this guy asks, you give it to him. But Marconi wasn't really like Tesla wasn't really that interested in his knowledge to be used for the further of suffering and war. And I think he died of natural causes, but I think there's some speculation that maybe that wasn't the case, But again, Marconi, that's also someone that, like Tesla, was. They were pioneers and they were like true Superman.
So also earlier we were talking about volcanoes and lightning and stuff. The other thing you see in volcanic activity not only is electrical activity but also UFOs. There are tons, and especially down by you, Red Pill, there are tons of UFO sightings near volcanoes.
Yeah. That is one of the reasons why in the latest card in the Tarot project that I finished, the world card, I decided to toy with that idea, and that's what I envisioned, this figure that is almost like a Gaia, Earth goddess figure that is coming out of a volcano. I was greatly influenced by the image of the demon in Fantasia, the Disney movie. The night of Bald Mountain. So I wanted to convey that of this, powerful female goddess coming out of this volcano, and also out of this volcano came out UFO thingies.
Nice.
Right. And then, of course, that has been tricksterized by L. Ron Hubbard into the mythology underlying Scientology.
Oh, yes.
All right, so let's see here. A tornado or an accompanying fireball dug a trench in a hard-packed clay tennis court in Curepipe, Mariantis in the Indian Ocean on May 24th, 1948. A trench running in a north-south direction, 60 feet long and 1 to 2.5 feet wide, was cut into the bare surface of the court to a depth varying from 1 to 4 inches. The material lifted from the trench was all thrown to the west at a distance of 50 feet. Pieces weighing about 1 pound were thrown as far as 30 feet. The surface material was slightly blackened as if by heating, and a crackling like that of sugarcane fire was heard for 2 or 3 minutes. One witness claims to have seen a ball of fire about 2 feet in diameter which crossed from a football pitch to the tennis court through the wire netting fence without leaving any evidence of its passage. From a physicist's point of view, this is one of the strangest fireball reports on record. It's hard to imagine any theory that could explain electrically charged gases that would pass through metal netting without effect and then interact with clay.
Someone to call Dr. Avilov. Get him to investigate this one, because that sounds like a potential candidate for an extraterrestrial probe crashing on our planet.
And this is another scary one here. A freakish blast of heat swept over the towns of Figueira da Foz and Coimbra, Portugal on July 6, 1949. It lasted only 2 minutes, but a naval officer reported that the temperature shot up from 100 degrees to 158 degrees Fahrenheit within that time. Many barnyard fowl were killed, and the Mondego River was reported to have dried up in several places.
Wow. Oh, wow.
When was this?
July 6, 1949.
Oh.
And that's scary.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like the kind of crazy weather we're having these days. No, but that kind of shift, like I do wonder within the realm of meteorological possibility. It's an intense. Was that that must have been Fahrenheit?
That's Fahrenheit.
158. Yeah.
Good point.
But I mean, to dry up, the river in certain places,
and even a jump of 58 degrees that is incredibly anomalous. Yeah.
And it only lasted 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So what the hell caused that?
That's wild.
An electrical pool swept over a witness in Yellowstone National Park in early September 1949. William B. Sanborn watched a hazy patch of blue light about 50 yards wide and 5 times that long sweep across a marsh and toward him, moving several feet per second under a low cloud. When the patch was but a few yards away, I noted a sudden calm in the air and a marked change in temperature, as well as what I believe was the odor of ozone. It kept low to the ground, actually flowing around everything that it came in contact with, coating it with a strange pulsating light. Each twig on the sagebrush was surrounded by a halo of light about 2 inches in diameter. It covered the automobile and my person, but it did not cover my skin. There was a marked tingling sensation on my scalp, and brushing my hair with my hand caused a snapping of tiny sparks. I obtained no shock from touching any object on the ground or the outside of the car.
Sounds like a sort of San Elmo's fire type phenomenon.
Yeah.
I mean, not that it's
exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. Got a few minutes left here. A possible natural Earth satellite was first sighted on November 17, 1956, a year before Sputnik. 7 more reports up to 1965 led J.P. Bagby to propose that a meteor may have approached the Earth just at the right angle and speed to be pulled into the orbit for 9 years before burning up.
Well, we know that is possible. In fact, right now, I think NASA has a plan to put a natural satellite on the orbit of the moon, to capture an asteroid and put it on the orbit of the moon yeah, to the idea of the moon, the moon's gravitational pull to pull, some kind of like rogue rock passing nearby, and getting, to orbit it for a number of years before crashing on its surface. I think it's, quite reasonable.
Yeah. I think that we try to disregard these things as a society just because it's more comfortable that way. Because when you think about the solar system being as active as it actually is, and the number of times we've had, asteroids hit the Earth that have caused some serious damage throughout.
Yeah.
This stuff it seems certainly plausible, and I think we just try to, not think about it, basically.
We seem to be pretty good at that.
Yes.
As a society. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, remember all those crazy videos from the Chelyabinsk comet from Russia? All these people that were driving on this car going and then there's this fireball that's across their windshield, and these people didn't even veer or hit the brakes. They just go there with their business, another day in Russia. Okay, these guys are hardcore.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
And that should have been a massive wake-up call to just how easy it is for us to get hit by something massive.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, I think in this sort of weird speculative way, too, and I'm not going into the politics of it, but just the fact that we had this pandemic that was, you think about all the Omega strain and, contagion and outbreak and all of these sort of fictionalized ideas that we have of a pandemic happening, in sort of the science fiction world and how the world would react to it and, the things that would come out of it. And I don't think any of what happened was anybody could have predicted the way that people reacted to it. It's just a very different world. And so I think that when you look at some of these speculative things that exist only in fiction for the most part, in terms of us really interacting with them, like UFOs, for instance, when we end up really facing what some of these things are, it could be very different, even if it is the same thing, even if it's a nuts and bolts UFO, heck,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we put our own interpretations on it with very limited data.
Right. Or how we're all going to, how the world will react to it, and then what the fallout will be. I mean, if actual disclosure happened, if actual, Biden and all the, the rest of the, world leaders got up and said, we've been hiding this for, the past, century, who knows what would happen? I mean, it could be very different. It could shake out very different than everybody thinks.
And I think if something came of the disclosure stuff that wasn't so similar to all the stuff we've been hearing for decades, I might take more notice.
Right.
It's the thing that if you've been paying attention, it's this, because the thing is people have short memories.
Yeah.
They forget, or they just never knew in the first place. They're just getting into the UFO stuff now, and they're just jumping right into the disclosure movement, and they're saying, oh, look, this is amazing. Look what's happening in our time. And it's but people were thinking this in the 80s and, and various other time periods, since.
Right. That's history. I mean, gosh, we can go back, humanity and the things we've been doing. It's pretty easy if you really look at the history going back.
Yeah. A purple, this is probably the last one, a purple-blue 4-inch ball surrounded by flame-colored halo appeared above the stove in Smethwick, England, home during a thunderstorm in 1975. The witness brushed it away from her, feeling heat around her gold wedding band. It burned a 2x4-inch hole in her dress and tights as it disappeared with a bang. The fabric around the hole was shriveled but not charred, and the print was faded. And I think that speaks to the very strange nature of ball lightning.
Yeah. It's interesting it didn't hurt her.
Yeah, exactly.
that we know of.
That we don't. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, maybe 2 years later, she developed cancer or something.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, this is the
right.
This reminds me of some of the accounts that Dr. Keith Green and Garry Nolan have been researching. You know, one of those were I think it was a man and her daughter driving, and then they noticed some kind of like a brilliant ball in front of their car, and then somehow the ball got inside their vehicle, and it touched the man, and it caused some kind of like severe burns in him, and I think that the guy, I may be mistaken, but I think the guy developed cancer and died.
Oh, wow. So I talked about this on the show a while back, but, you know, we had that ball shoot through the car when we were in Japan. You know, we thought it was a headlight on like a motorcycle ahead, and it was coming down the road.
Right.
And it went right through the windshield, went right between me and my professor, and went out the back window.
Yeah. There you go.
I hope I don't get cancer. But we didn't feel anything. It was just bright.
Right.
You know, I mean, it was weird.
Yeah.
The lack of resistance around her, you know what I mean? Or disturbance.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, we're pretty much out of time here. Red Pill, where can people find you?
At my home, working my ass off so I can finish this goddamn tarot cards on time.
How about online?
And also they can...
How about online?
Online, they can find me at the Daily Grail, www.dailygrail.com. They can find my website, which is sorely neglected, absorbedbydesign.com. They can find me on Twitter. They can find me on Facebook too. And they can also find quite a few of these episodes on Where Did the Road Go, where I have been kindly invited to participate.
Yes. And Chris?
You can go to brightrectangle.com for weird film and video stuff. Yeah.
And what about you, Super Infra Man?
You know, I float around the Discord, on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter a bit more these days, but I'll be honest, I'm like having fun talking about comic books and things on there. So be warned, I don't talk about as much anomalous stuff on Twitter.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a Patreon segment following this where we talk about more stories from mysteries of the unexplained, mostly UFO cases. And so if you want to become a patron, it's only $3 a month. I do recommend you wait to the early part of the month, because if you subscribe in the last days of the month, it's going to recharge you when the new month starts. So just a handy suggestion. Earlier is better to subscribe, just because, you know, that way you pay and get a month's worth or so, rather than paying and then getting charged again a few days later. So, yeah. But it helps out the show greatly. You have no idea how much the Patreon helps me keep this show going. We're going to be doing some more short episodes as well, so I may keep that going, as everyone seemed to like that. We recorded 2 when we recorded this, so they'll be up later this week, at least one, probably both of them. And, of course, on the site is merch and all our social media and everything else, so if you like the show, go connect with us. If you have any personal stories you want to relate, stories@wheredidtheroadgo.com. I'd really love to end this show with Tanya Donnelly's Mysteries of the Unexplained, just because it's really fitting, but I don't have the rights to do that, so I can't. But you know what? You can go find that on your own if you want to check it out, and it's just kind of an appropriate song, and it's named perfectly. I will see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.